If I were to tell you that the lineage of humanity, as you've been taught, is a carefully constructed lie, that the story you learned about Cain, Abel, and Seth is merely a shadow play on the wall of a cave, designed to conceal a truth that's infinitely grander, more complex, and, to some, terrifying? You're about to venture into the hidden secret of Adam's other children, the forgotten princes of creation, those whose names and entire civilizations were meticulously erased from the sacred pages. This revelation hasn't reached you by chance. If you feel a void in the official history, if your soul senses missing pieces in the great puzzle of your origin, it's because your spirit is ready to remember. What you're about to hear isn't just a theory. It's a spiritual awakening that will compel you to question the very foundations of your faith and your identity. Take a deep breath and look back towards the dawn of time. Imagine the world before the world as you know it. A world teeming with potential, rife with untold stories waiting to be unearthed. The version you were taught in church and read in Genesis is simple, almost childlike. Adam and Eve, their first two sons, a fratricidal murder, and a third son, Seth, destined to continue the righteous lineage. But this neat and orderly narrative has cracks through which the light of a much deeper truth escapes. Have you ever wondered where Cain's wife came from if supposedly only his parents existed on earth? How could a single man, a fugitive marked by sin, build an entire city if the world was practically uninhabited? These aren't heretical questions. They're the keys that unlock doors sealed for millennia. The answer to this forbidden mystery isn't found in the texts you were allowed to read, but in those that the church and its councils decided to set aside, hide, and condemn: apocryphal manuscripts, ancient traditions, and Gnostic texts that speak of a much larger offspring, of sons and daughters whose destinies were deliberately forgotten. What the church never revealed is that this omission wasn't a mistake but an act of control. The forbidden truth is that Adam and Eve didn't have just 3 children but dozens. These children weren't minor characters in the drama of Eden. They were the founders of the First Nations, the patriarchs of civilizations that flourished parallel to the lineage of Seth. Why was such crucial information silenced? Because admitting their existence would destroy the pillar upon which a narrative of exclusivity and power was built, the idea of a single chosen people. If Adam had multiple lineages that populated the earth, then the great cultures that the Old Testament labels as pagan and enemies, such as the Sumerians, the Egyptians, or the Babylonians, are also direct descendants of the first man. The war against the pagans was actually a civil war between brothers, a family tragedy that was rewritten to justify the power of a single branch of the tree of humanity. Imagine the ancient world, not as a collection of disparate tribes, but as a sprawling family, each branch vying for dominance, each carrying the same ancestral spark. This isn't a story alien to you. It's the story of your own blood, of your lost spiritual heritage. You aren't the descendant of a secondary or cursed lineage. You're part of the original diaspora of Eden, a truth that was denied to you to keep you disconnected from your true power and your brotherhood with all of humanity. This channel is a sanctuary for souls like yours who seek to lift the veil of deception. Together, we'll unearth the truths that have been denied to you, one revelation at a time, until the great tapestry of our shared history is displayed in all its splendor. If you're prepared to reclaim your heritage and rebuild your faith on the rock of complete truth and not on the sand of a mutilated story, subscribe now because the doors of forbidden knowledge are opening for you. The version you were told is simple, almost a lullaby designed to soothe curious minds. You were told that at the dawn of humanity, Adam and Eve had Cain and Abel. One killed the other. And to repair the broken lineage, Seth was born, the righteous one, the father of the bloodline that would reach Noah and, millennia later, Jesus himself. It's a clean, linear story with a clear beginning, middle, and end. But did you ever feel deep down that this simplicity was a mask? That behind this orderly facade hid a chaos of untold truths? This is what they wanted you to believe, the official version polished by centuries of counsels and sermons. However, what they erased from the sacred pages tells a story infinitely grander, more complex, and, for them, much more dangerous. The cracks in this narrative are so evident that it's a miracle they've remained hidden in plain sight for so long. Why does no one talk about this? Why did the church never encourage you to ask the obvious questions? If only Adam, Eve, and Cain existed, where did the woman with whom Cain built his descendants come from? Genesis says that Cain, the fugitive, built a city. A city for whom? How can a single marked and exiled man raise walls and found a civilization in a supposedly deserted land? These aren't minor inconsistencies. They're the scars of a brutal surgery, the vestiges of entire chapters that were torn from the book of your origin. The answer to this mystery isn't found in the Bibles that rest on the altars, but in the texts that were declared apocryphal, heretical, and cursed manuscripts like the Book of Jubilees, an ancient Jewish text that was excluded from the canon, or the writings of the first-century historian Flavius Josephus, who speaks with terrifying clarity of a much more prolific offspring. They mention daughters, name the wives of the first patriarchs, and describe a land that was teeming with life and clans long before what you were led to believe. What the church never revealed is that this omission wasn't an accident or a slip of a sleepy scribe. It was a conscious decision, an act of theological censorship executed by the architects of organized religion. In the early centuries after Christ, powerful men in councils like Nicaea or Trent sat in opulent halls and, with the authority they granted themselves, decided what was the word of God and what was a dangerous lie. They erased names, altered genealogies, and condemned entire lineages to oblivion so that history would fit their agenda of power. What if everything you know is an incomplete version, a truth mutilated to serve an empire? Because that and no other is the reality of your spiritual heritage. The forbidden truth, the one that shakes the foundations of 2 millennia of doctrine, is this: Adam and Eve didn't have just 3 children. They had dozens, sons and daughters whose names resonate like ghostly echoes in Gnostic traditions and Kabbalistic texts. Asherah, Abel's twin sister, Awan, Cain's wife, and many others whose names were lost in the mists of history, princes and princesses of Eden who weren't mere extras in the drama of the fall but the founders of the First Nations, the patriarchs of civilizations that flourished in the shadow of the lineage of Seth. And it's here where the mystery becomes a conspiracy on a cosmic scale. Why silence such a fundamental truth? Why reduce the family tree of humanity to a single branch? The answer is as simple as it is devastating: control. To build the narrative of a single chosen people, it was necessary to demonize or ignore everyone else. If they admitted that the great empires of antiquity, such as the Sumerians, the Egyptians, or the cultures of the Indus Valley, were also direct descendants of Adam, the entire structure of exclusivity and divine favor would collapse like a house of cards. You were taught to see these cultures as pagan, as enemies of God, as peoples alien to the promise. But that's the greatest of lies. What the church never revealed is that the war against the pagans was actually a civil war, a tragic and bloody family dispute that was rewritten so that one branch of the tree could claim the entirety of the garden for itself. The early church fathers, in order to consolidate their power within the Roman Empire, needed a simple story, a clear enemy, and an exclusive path to salvation that only they could administer. A world full of descendants of Adam, each with their own culture, their own wisdom, and their own connection to the divine, was an unacceptable theological and political threat. So they cut the branches, burned the texts, condemned the sages who preserved these memories, and gave you an incomplete story, a faith based on oblivion. Do you understand now the magnitude of this deception? Your spiritual identity was built on the denial of your own family. You were taught to feel separate from the vast majority of humanity when in reality you share with every human being a sacred heritage that was stolen from you. This spiritual revelation goes beyond correcting a historical fact. It's about reclaiming your place in the great family of creation. The scribes who altered the sacred texts weren't just erasing names from a parchment. They were erasing your connection with the totality of the human experience. They were raising walls where there were once bridges, sowing division where there was once a fundamental, albeit complex, unity. Why would they be so afraid of you knowing that you descend from a bloodline as powerful and divine as that of the biblical prophets? Because a soul that knows its true origin, its universal connection, is a soul that cannot be controlled. A spirit that recognizes its brother in the face of the stranger is a spirit that cannot be sent to war in the name of an exclusive God. The hidden secret of Adam's other children is, in essence, the secret of our lost brotherhood, a truth so potent that it had to be buried under millennia of dogma and fear. We have exposed the wound, We have pointed out those who inflicted it, and we have revealed the dark motive behind the veil of deception. But this is just the beginning. Being lied to is one thing, and it's a powerful awakening, but it's only the first step. The next revelation is even deeper, more personal, and for some, more disturbing because we still haven't pronounced the names of the 7 forgotten princes. The 7 male children of Adam whose lineages founded kingdoms that official history attributes to mysterious or pagan origins. We still haven't walked through the ruins of their lost cities, nor have we deciphered the symbols they left behind. Discovering the majesty of what was stolen from you, knowing the true story of your forbidden ancestors, is a truth that will not only change your faith but will rewrite the map of your own soul. Prepare yourself because we're about to call them by name. The evidence of this forbidden truth isn't in the gilded altars or in the Sunday sermons that lull the spirit. No, the evidence is hidden in plain sight in the cracks of the very text they gave you and buried in the manuscripts that burned in the pyres of orthodoxy. To find them, you must learn to read not only the words but the silences between them. You must search in the margins, in the verses that theologians skip with nervous haste, in the echoes of the traditions that refuse to die. What the Church never revealed is that the canonical Bible itself contains the seed of its own contradiction, a fragment silenced for centuries that, once exposed to the light, makes the entire edifice of deception falter. It's a secret hidden in the most read book in the world, waiting for a brave soul like yours to dare to look at it head-on. Are you ready to see what was always there? Open the book of Genesis, the very pillar of their narrative, and go to chapter 5, verse 4. After recounting the birth of Seth, the text says something that should have exploded 2,000 years of theology. I quote directly, "And the days of Adam after he had begotten Seth were 800 years, and he begot sons and daughters." Read it again, slowly, sons and daughters in plural. It's not a typo. It's not a metaphor. It's a direct statement, a confession trapped in the amber of sacred writing. The canonical text itself, the one they allowed you to read, admits that Adam had more offspring. Why did your priest never read this verse aloud? Why do biblical studies obsessively focus on the line of Seth and ignore this phrase as if it burned on the lips? Because this simple line destroys the lie of a deserted humanity and opens the door to the forbidden truth of a large, vibrant, and complex first family. They gave you a story of 3 brothers when the source itself admits that they were legion. What else did they hide from us in the folds of these texts? To find the names, to put faces to those forgotten sons and daughters, we must venture beyond the walls of the canon, towards the texts they declared dangerous. One of the most revealing is the Book of Jubilees, a forbidden text that almost disappeared, considered sacred by Jewish communities for centuries before Christianity condemned it. This manuscript, rediscovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls in Qumran, doesn't whisper. It screams the names that were erased. It tells us that Cain took his sister Awan as his wife and that Seth married his other sister, Asherah. They aren't ghosts. They have names. They had lives, dreams, and destinies that were stolen from you to simplify the story. This sacred text describes a primitive world full of clans and families that were expanding rapidly. Do you realize the power of this spiritual revelation? Cain's wife wasn't a theological mystery. She was his own sister, a fact that was deliberately hidden to avoid uncomfortable questions about the origin of humanity. But the evidence doesn't end in the texts considered heretical. Let's go to secular history, to the voice of a man who wasn't subject to the dogmas of the early church. Flavius Josephus, a respected Jewish Roman historian of the 1st century, wrote a monumental work called Antiquities of the Jews. In it, when narrating the origins of his people, he speaks openly of Adam's extensive progeny. Josephus, who had access to archives of the Temple of Jerusalem, today lost forever, corroborates that Adam and Eve had numerous sons and daughters, describing a world population that was growing exponentially. His testimony, that of a historian who wrote for a skeptical Roman audience, confirms that the knowledge of a large original family was common before the Church consolidated its power and began its great purge of history. They silenced the spiritual voices and also the historical ones. Why would they be so afraid of you knowing that you descend from such a vast and diverse bloodline? The answer, as always, is power. In the centuries after Christ, When the church went from being a persecuted sect to the official religion of the Roman Empire, it needed a simple, unified, and, above all, controllable narrative. A world full of descendants of Adam, each with their own culture, their own wisdom, and their own connection to the divine, was an unacceptable theological and political threat. In councils like Nicaea, men with silk robes and gold rings sat down to decide what was truth and what was a lie. They mutilated history, burned the Gospels that didn't fit their vision, like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and condemned entire lineages to oblivion to build their empire on the sand of oblivion. What the church never revealed is that its authority isn't based on an uninterrupted divine truth, but on an act of cosmic censorship. They gave you an exclusive God for an exclusive people because a universal God for a universal family doesn't need intermediaries. We have unearthed the testimony of the Bible itself. We have heard the voice of the forbidden texts, and we have confirmed the truth with ancient historians. Have you seen the written evidence, the words that survived the fire and time? We have talked about the daughters, the mothers of the first tribes, whose existence resolves the paradoxes of Genesis. But we still haven't talked about the forgotten princes, about the other male children of Adam whose lineages founded kingdoms that official history attributes to mysterious or pagan origins. Have you seen the testimony of ink and papyrus? Words that skeptics can discuss or reinterpret, but you still haven't seen the most shocking proof, the one that cannot be erased because it isn't written in a book but carved in the stone of the oldest civilizations in the world. Stop for a moment, take a deep breath, and feel the echo of this revelation in the depths of your being. This truth that you have just heard isn't a simple religious curiosity. It isn't a historical fact to debate in internet forums. It's a key that opens a locked room within your own soul, a room that you didn't even know existed. Have you ever felt an inexplicable melancholy when looking at the stars? Have you felt a deep connection with the pyramids of Egypt, the ziggurats of Sumeria, or the ancient legends of India? As if a part of you remembered having been there, that feeling of not quite fitting into the narrative they gave you, that longing for distant lands and lost wisdoms, it's not a fantasy. It's the memory of your blood calling home. It's the whisper of your ancestors, forgotten, the sons and daughters of Adam, whose names were erased yet whose essence endures in your spiritual DNA. And perhaps you yourself have lived, unaware that this truth was inscribed upon your soul, feeling the phantom pain of a family severed from you before your birth. Comprehend the depth of this deception by reducing the human family to a single righteous lineage and labeling all others as pagans or lost souls. The architects of control not only rewrote history, they poisoned the present, created the illusion of separation, taught you to fear, to judge, and to feel superior or inferior to other cultures, other peoples, other races. But this is the grand lie. What the church never revealed is that every war of religion, every crusade, every conflict justified in the name of a singular God has been fratricide, a civil war on a planetary scale, among the lost descendants of the same singular first family. Do you realize the power that this forbidden truth grants you? It liberates you from the chains of spiritual tribalism, allows you to see the face of your brother, of your sister in every human being you encounter, regardless of their skin color, the language they speak, or the name they give to the divine. The true original sin was not biting into a fruit. It was the deliberate act of making you forget the faces of your siblings to dominate them all. This spiritual revelation is not meant to be hoarded as intellectual treasure. It is meant to be lived, to be breathed, to be embodied. You are not a historical accident or the product of some secondary lineage. You are living proof that truth survived the flames and the oblivion. Your curiosity, your thirst for knowledge, your refusal to accept easy answers are the direct inheritance of those lineages that dared to explore, to build, and to connect with God in different ways. You are the descendant of the builders of cities, of the astronomers, of the sages who were erased from the sacred pages. This is the moment to reclaim your heritage. It's not just a comment on a video. It's a spiritual decree, a declaration that the age of oblivion has ended. It is an act to realign your spirit with the complete truth of your origin. Write in the comments, "I am an heir to the forgotten truth." Do it now and feel an ancient force awaken within you, because by naming the truth you give it power over deceit. But I must warn you, what you've seen so far is merely the surface of the ocean. We have unearthed the proof that you were lied to. We have exposed the conspiracy of oblivion, and we have begun to heal the wound of separation. It is an immense awakening, yes, but it is only the first veil we tear away. Knowing that Adam had more children is like discovering that there are other galaxies in the universe. It is a mind-expanding truth, but knowing their names, discovering the empires they founded, deciphering the wisdom they possessed, and understanding why their power was so feared by those who wrote history, that, my friend, is like learning to navigate those galaxies. The hidden secret is not just that other children existed. The real forbidden mystery is what they represented and the legacy they left us, a legacy that can still be reclaimed today. Now ask yourself, honestly, why so much effort to erase precisely these lineages? Why not simply ignore them? The answer is terrifying. The forbidden truth is that these other sons of Adam were not mere farmers or shepherds who strayed from the path. They were bearers of a different light, of a wisdom that the lineage of Seth had lost or perhaps never possessed. The Gnostic traditions whisper that some of them retained the memory of the Garden of Eden, not as a place of sin but as a dimension of higher consciousness. Their realms were not based on sacrifice and fear, but on astronomy, on the vibration of sound, and on a direct connection with creation that needed no intermediaries or priests. What the church never revealed is that they were not erased for being pagans, but because their spiritual science was so advanced that it made the rituals of organized religion seem like child's play. They feared their power, they feared their knowledge, and above all, they feared that you would discover it. We have spoken of the daughters, the mothers of the lost tribes, but the Vatican, in its deepest archives, does not tremble before the name of Awan or Azura. It trembles before the memory of the 7 princes, 7 male sons of Adam, whose destinies were so grand, so luminous, and so dangerous to the official narrative that their existence became the greatest heresy of all. Their names were not only erased from the texts, they were subjected to rituals of condemnation to try to annihilate their memory from the collective consciousness, but they failed because their legacy is not written on parchments that can be burned, but in the stone of the pyramids, in the alignment of the megaliths, and in the blood that runs through your veins. We are about to pronounce the 7 names that the church has attempted to silence for 2 millennia. Are you prepared to know the true royalty of your lineage? You have walked with me through the shadows of history. You have seen the cracks in the wall of the official narrative, and you have felt the echo of a truth that refuses to die. You have learned the names of Awan and Azura, the daughters of dawn, whose existence resolves the paradoxes that theologians prefer to ignore. You have understood that the family of Adam was vast, a leafy tree whose branches extended across the earth. But I must confess something. Until now, we have only been at the threshold. What you have learned, while an immense revelation, is only the antechamber of the true forbidden mystery, because the secret is not simply that other children existed. That is the truth that distracts you, the one that allows you to reorganize your faith without demolishing it completely? Did you believe that the secret was merely a larger family tree? That the conspiracy was limited to erasing a few names from a parchment to justify the power of a single tribe? That is the lie. Within the lie, the truth is infinitely more brutal, more overwhelming. It is a truth that not only rewrites history but inverts the roles of hero and villain, of the sacred and the profane, of light and shadow. Prepare yourself, because the revelation that follows is the reason why they burned entire libraries and massacred the Gnostics. It is the truth that the Vatican has kept under 7 locks, not out of fear of heresy, but out of fear that you will recognize your own power. Take a deep breath, because everything you believe to know about good and evil, about the chosen people and the pagans, about God and false idols, was manipulated. The revelation that changes everything, the tipping point that makes the entire universe rotate on its axis, is this: the great and majestic civilizations that the Old Testament taught you to despise as pagan and idolatrous, the Sumerians, the Egyptians, the builders of Babylon, the cultures of the Indus Valley, were not peoples alien to God. They were the kingdoms founded by the other sons of Adam, not the enemies but our family. The Sumerians, with their astonishing knowledge of astronomy and mathematics, did not receive their wisdom from alien gods. They inherited it from a prince of Eden. The Egyptians, with their obsession with life after death and resurrection, were not worshipping gods with animal heads. They were attempting to preserve in a distorted way the memory of the immortality lost in the garden. What the Church never revealed is that the holy war narrated in the Bible was not a struggle between light and darkness, but a bloody and tragic civil war between the descendants of Adam. The lineage of Seth, self-proclaimed as the only righteous one, embarked on a millennial campaign to conquer, subdue, or annihilate their own siblings. Do you now comprehend the magnitude of this deception? Every pagan who was massacred in the name of God was a distant cousin. Every culture that was demonized was a branch of the same sacred tree. This truth changes everything. It's as if a crucial page, the one that explained the purpose of the entire story, had been torn from the book of life. The Tower of Babel, which you were told was a tale about the punishment of human pride, now takes on a new and heartbreaking meaning. What if it was not an act of defiance against God, but the last and desperate attempt of the dispersed clans of Adam to reunite, a grand Congress of the nations to rebuild the lost unity, a project that was sabotaged by those forces that benefited from division and war? Suddenly, the Old Testament is no longer the story of a chosen people fighting against a hostile world, but the war diary of a faction that rewrote history to justify its conquest. The miracles that destroyed enemy armies no longer seem like acts of divine justice, but weapons in a family feud, and the prophets who cried out against the idolatry of neighboring kingdoms. Perhaps some were holy men, but others might simply have been war propagandists, demonizing the spirituality of their brothers to legitimize the invasion. Why does no one preach this? Because admitting this truth would demolish 2 millennia of moral and theological superiority. It would force you to see that the war God of the Old Testament did not always speak for creation but for the interests of a single lineage. And the conspiracy becomes even deeper. Ask yourself, why did the lineage of Seth feel entitled to judge and conquer its brothers? The answer is the true hidden secret. The forbidden truth is that the other lineages, the ones that founded Egypt and Samaria, were not only different culturally, they were different spiritually. They preserved a form of knowledge, a science of the spirit that the lineage of Seth had lost or rejected, while the line of Seth developed. A religion based on obedience, blood sacrifice, and faith through intermediaries such as priests and prophets. Their siblings developed a spirituality based on direct connection. They used sacred geometry to build temples that were energy machines. They practiced sonic alchemy to alter consciousness, and they studied the stars not to predict the future but to understand the cosmic cycles and align the soul with the universe. What the church never revealed is that they did not erase them for being pagans, but because their spiritual technology was superior. They were a threat, not because of their lack of faith, but because their direct connection to the divine made the entire priestly class unnecessary. They erased them to sell you a limited and controlled version of God, one in which you need them to open the door to heaven for you. This spiritual revelation is not a story of the past. It is the map of your soul. That longing you feel for ancient wisdom, that fascination with the mysteries of Egypt, that feeling that there is more to the universe than you have been told, is not a coincidence. It is the memory of your blood. It is the whisper of your forgotten ancestors calling you to reclaim your heritage. Perhaps you are a descendant of that silenced truth. Your spirit does not resonate with dogma because it was not designed for it. It was designed for the stars, for vibration, for direct knowledge of the sacred. The truth that was denied you is that you don't need anyone to save you, because divinity is not something that is bestowed upon you from the outside. It is the legacy that already runs through your veins. Reclaiming this truth is an act of power. It is telling the universe that the time of forgetting is over. I want you to seal this moment. It's not just a comment in a video. It is a spiritual decree, an affirmation of your true identity. Write in the comments, "I am a child of the forbidden truth." Do it now, and feel the invisible chains of millennia of deception begin to break. You have seen the conspiracy in all its magnitude. You have understood that the history of humanity was not a straight line, but a glorious tree whose most beautiful branches were cut off and thrown into the fire. You have understood that the war was not between God and demons, but between brothers, and you have begun to feel that the wisdom of those lost lineages is your birthright. But this only leads us to the most important and dangerous question of all. We have talked about them as a collective, as the other sons, the forgotten princes, but they were not an anonymous mass. They were individuals, 7 princes of Eden, whose names were so powerful, whose legends were so luminous, that they had to be cursed and erased from human memory through rituals of forgetting. Their names are not just labels. They are vibratory keys that open portals to forms of consciousness that organized religion has tried to keep closed. Why do you think the Vatican guards its most secret archives so zealously? It is not for the apocryphal Gospels. It is for the records that contain the true names and stories of the 7 wise kings who descended from Adam. And we are about to do the unthinkable. We are about to pronounce their names. Now you know. The weight of this forbidden truth is immense, almost unbearable, because it not only changes the past, it poisons every victory and every tragedy that you were told. Every civilization that was labeled pagan and erased from the map, every temple that was torn down in the name of a jealous god, every people that was massacred for not kneeling before the lineage of Seth, was a family murder, a fratricide on a global scale orchestrated and justified by a lie. What the church never revealed is that paradise was not lost for a fruit, but for the ambition of a single branch of the tree of humanity, which decided to cut down all the others to keep all the sun. The history of your world is not that of light against darkness, but that of a light that tried to extinguish other lights to shine alone. This is the ultimate spiritual revelation. The enemy you were taught to hate carried your same blood. The foreigner you were taught to fear was a lost brother. And the God in whose name these atrocities were committed was not the creator of everything, but the tribal god of a faction that won the war and wrote the story. And this truth, this hidden secret that now burns in your conscience, is not a dead relic of the past. It lives in you, it pulsates in your blood. It is the reason for that inexplicable melancholy that sometimes assails you, that feeling of not belonging entirely to this world of dogmas and borders. It is the echo of your soul remembering a time of unity, of shared wisdom, of direct connection with the divine. Your fascination with the pyramids, your attraction to the astrology of the Sumerians, your longing for a spirituality that does not need intermediaries. It is not a coincidence. It is your heritage calling at your door. You are the descendant of the forgotten lineages, the heir to the spiritual science that was declared witchcraft, the bearer of a light that they tried to extinguish, but that survived latent in souls like yours, waiting for the moment to awaken. Reclaiming this truth is not an act of rebellion. It is an act of memory. It is remembering who you are beyond the identity that was imposed on you. But this spiritual revelation comes with a solemn warning. The greatest forbidden mystery is not what they erased from the Bible, but what you will do with this truth that you know. Will you return to the comfort of the lie, to the security of the golden cage they built for you? Or will you dare to live from this new consciousness, to see every human being as a member of your lost family, to seek the divine in the traditions that you were taught to despise? Knowledge without action is a buried treasure. This truth has not been given to you to keep, but to free you and through you to free others. The question is no longer what they hid from us, but what you are going to build with what you have discovered. I want you to stop and reflect deeply on this. What would you do if this truth changed your faith today? How does your vision of the world, of God, and of yourself transform when you know that all of humanity is a single sacred family separated by a millenary lie? The veil has been torn, but this is only the first seal that we break together on our way to the complete truth. You have shown that you have the courage to look beyond the shadow, to question the foundations of the reality that was imposed on you. This channel is a sanctuary for souls who, like yours, refuse to live in the darkness of deception. If you feel the call to continue this journey of discovery, to unearth every forbidden mystery that was denied to you, join our community of seekers. Subscribe, activate notifications, and share this light, because the truth belongs to all of us. We have rebuilt the lineage of Adam. We have found his lost children. But what if the lie started earlier? If Adam had more than we were told, was Eve really the only mother of all living beings? In our next meeting, you will discover the secret that the church never wanted to preach about the first woman of Adam, a figure so powerful that her mere name was considered the greatest of heresies.